First of all, we have to understand that the term Arab Spring is a racist and a neo-colonial term, because the popular uprisings against dictators and authoritarian autocrats in North Africa is the uprising of Africans against these autocrats. All of the Arab nations, all of the so-called Arab nations, because there is no such thing as an Arab nation, and I'll explain why later, but all of these uprisings have occurred in Africa. Libya, Tunisia, Egypt are all in Africa. Right or wrong?
Yeah, right.
So when the Europeans and the intellectuals and the mass media terms these uprisings, these popular uprisings as, quote, the Arab Spring, they're separating what happens in North Africa from the rest of the continent. Because there's autocrats, dictators, and corrupt regimes in the rest of Africa. There's 53 countries in Africa. All of those, out of those 53 countries, every country that I just named, Libya, Egypt, Tunisia, are all counted as one of the African countries. Now, the fact that it's racist shows you how the internalization of racism is also practiced by Arabs. Pan-Arabism started out as an anti-imperialist ideology against British imperialism, even against the Turkish Ottoman Empire at the end of World War I. Okay, but it is twisted. It's been twisted after the death of Abdel Nasser, who was one of the founding members of the Third World Alliances in the 50s and 60s. The alternative alliances to the North, to the East-West paradigm. It was, up until that point, African. It didn't distinguish, Nasser didn't distinguish Egypt from the rest of Africa in the sense that he saw Egypt as geopolitically part of Africa, but also having a geopolitical role in the Mediterranean and the Middle East. Okay. When we use the term Arab Spring, we're reinforcing, first of all, the notion that North Africa isn't part of Africa. The Arabs on the African continent aren't Africans, they're just Arabs. Okay? Then that means we're reinforcing the historical dichotomy, the historical contradiction of the Arab invasions of Africa. Because Islam penetrated Africa with the invasion of Muslims, from the Arabian Peninsula. And when we look across the continent of Africa, we see the high water mark of the Arab invasions of Africa today mark the demarcation line between the Muslim North and non-Muslim South in most sub-Saharan countries. So the term Arab Spring is a neo-colonial divisive strategy, geopolitical strategy, to say that the Arab world, so-called Arab world, has a special relationship to the West that the rest of Africa doesn't have. Africa was just as colonized as any other part of Asia and the Middle East by Western imperial powers. But the difference between Africa and the Arab world in this sense is that one of the things that we really don't understand or don't appreciate is that this has been internalized by Arab-speaking people. There's, like I said, and I'm coming to that now, there's no such thing as Arab nation. There's the Arabic language. And this language is shared by many people in a particular region, concentrated in a particular region, but it's also a language that's shared by the Ummah. Because every day that we make Salat, we make it in Arabic. The Quran is the classic Arabic. Arabia is the Quran. There's more Muslims in Indonesia and the Far East than there is in the entire Middle East. So there's more people that speak Arabic every day when they make Salat than there are Arabs. So this whole idea of Arab Spring is crap. It was the uprising of oppressed peoples against autocrats and dictators supported and set up by imperialism. And these same dictators, these same autocrats, and these same individuals, whether they're Abdul Wahad in Senegal, whether they're Bashir in Sudan, all of these dictators, all of these autocrats, are just that, dictators and autocrats in Africa.
Okay.
Now, I want to end with this part. When I say that this racism has been internalized by Arab-speaking people, when we look at what happened in Libya, when the opposition that was in league with the West to Gaddafi put out the idea that Gaddafi had hired black mercenaries from the South to kill Libyans, to suppress Libyans. Once this idea was circulated, it was amplified. The racism of Arabs was played upon. The racism of the West was used to play upon that. You know, Europeans and Arabs share a common racism. They share a common racism. You see, and so after Gaddafi has been overthrown, we know now the Africans who were in Libya doing work, who had nothing to do with Gaddafi's regime, they were there trying to find work. So a lot of them were migrants, were trying to get to Europe. These people are in concentration camps. They're tortured every day as we speak. Okay? Tens of thousands of black Africans in Libya right now are being treated like this. Okay?
By the new regime.
Yes, by the new so-called new regime. It's pro-Western new regimes that they have, okay? As we speak. And the fact that, that Muslims are not outraged by it, and that the so-called supporters of the Arab Spring are not outraged by it, once again reinforces what I'm saying about Arabs internalizing and expressing white supremacy and racism right at home. Because when you ask an Arab, when you ask a North African, Tunisia, what are you? Who are you? He says, I am Arab. I'm an Arab. You say, okay, but you're Arab and I'm Muslim. He says, okay, what else? He says, and I'm Tunisian. He never says, I'm African, I'm an Arab, and I'm Muslim. He never says, I'm Muslim and an African. After all, we are all born Muslim. Because Muslim means one who submits to the will of Allah. So every living creature on this planet submits to the will of Allah. So we were born Muslim. We make decisions not to be Muslims as we grow up, but we were born Muslim. So the first thing out of an Arab's mouth, the first things out of an African's mouth should be, I'm Muslim. I'm African. I'm Arab. I'm Tunisian. Not I'm Arab, Tunisian, Muslim, and they don't even mention Africa. You see? So that's what I want to emphasize. The idea and the notion that the Arab, that what happens in North Africa is somehow disconnected from the rest of the African continent and the historical continuum of Africa is a racist notion that's perpetrated by racist elites and is perpetrated by racist Muslims.
Okay, and you think that this so-called Arab Spring is manipulated by Western powers?
Most definitely. I mean, you got Western powers trying to claim responsibility for the Arab Spring. I mean, I just read an article recently in Al Jazeera where the Western media is trying to say that the father of the Arab Spring is Ariel Sharansky, who wrote about democratic revolutions a couple of years ago, and they say that that was the blueprint that was used for the so-called, quote, Arab Spring. You know, then you have other people that saying that the uprisings in North Africa were the consequence of social networks like Twitter, and that all of these things, all of this is crap. You do not have mass uprising based on Facebook, you know, or Twitter. Mass uprisings come when people have had enough, and they have activists who have been organizing and working and who people trust and who people have faith in, who people know are not part of the system, who have sacrificed. Many of the leaders of the so-called Arab Spring were either put in prison before or were either in prison during the whole episodes of these uprisings in Tunisia. So it was nothing new. Resistance is not the consequence of Facebook and the internet. Now, new communication methods may facilitate our ability or the masses' ability to mobilize faster, but you're not going to mobilize a revolution on Facebook. Okay, so the fact that the West tries to claim responsibility for it, Obama, they say that that it was Bush's policy of democratization before Obama, you know, that led to the Arab Spring. And then you got other people saying that Obama is the one that helped the Arab Spring because he didn't do anything. He let it happen. You see? It's all crap. Up until the last minute, up until Mubarak was out of office, the United States was still dealing with this man. There's documents that came out in WikiLeaks to show that the U.S. State Department was advising him on how to handle the rebellion in Egypt, how to handle the masses of people. You see what I'm saying? The same with Libya, the same with all of these places. Okay? So what we really need to understand is that, first of all, the old imperial powers in the United States had absolutely nothing to do with the uprising of Arab people against their dictators. In fact, it was the complete opposite. They supported these dictators, they gave them money, they bolstered their military, and they turned their face away from the abuses that these individuals were visiting on their own people. If you look at the Algerian election that was won by the Islamic party there in Algeria, the United States allowed the Nigerian regime to abrogate the election. The Islamists won the election in Algeria. You see, when we look at what happened with Hamas in the Gaza, Hamas won the election, hands down. All of a sudden, the United States was no longer about democracy. Okay, all of a sudden, Hamas, you know, the people chose, this was the people's leaders. Well, they said, well, as long as you choose them as your leader, this is what we're going to do to you. You see. So this whole idea and this whole notion that the Arab Spring was, first of all, a unique phenomenon that could only happen in the Arab world is a racist proposition. And it's an ahistorical proposition, okay? And the other notion that it was organized through social networks and that's what made it effective is beside the point. It's not really true. And finally, the idea or the concept that the West has somehow supported a democratization in Africa and throughout the Arab Muslim world is, of course, we all know not true.